So we'll see.
Only now.
Pulling up a monitor to see if we are in fact live. If we are in fact live and you are watching now, you will notice there are three of us tonight. There's one to my left and one below me. Mr. Barry Kirby has been on for the last couple weeks, subbing in for Blake. And
Hello.
below me, you might recognize Mr. Frank Lacson, who's been on the show before. Welcome to the pre-show, everybody. Looks like we're live, so yes, that's good. If you are,
I'll say something now. It's officially the next day, so I'm now a time zone ahead of you.
You're a day ahead of us.
Yeah.
I think more than a time zone.
Yeah.
If you are watching live on one of our new platforms, i.e. LinkedIn, thank you for watching on that platform. They have just approved us, the channel proper for live streaming. So that's kind of exciting. That's fun, exciting, interesting. And
talking business speak and that type of thing, or are we just going to crack it the way we usually do?
Well, yes.
Just calm down on the swearing and the naked dancing, yeah?
Yes, both of those. Yeah. This is LinkedIn is very professional. Button up. Oh, I forgot my shirt. Yeah. No naked dancing.
You wouldn't let me do it last week either. Although what before.
It was one of our early episodes where what's the word I'm looking for? We were misguided in how we approached the titles. In fact, so much that we got called out by a reviewer that our titles were not user-friendly. And so back when we were doing fun titles to categorize the show, we had one said, this used to be a family show. And I don't exactly remember what we were talking about on that show to make it so vulgar is not the word.
Not family friendly.
Not family friendly. But anyway, we said something on there that was the title.
There we go.
Yes.
I got pitched an idea for a different type of show on, say, to do a monthly show or something like that, which is that we do a monthly wrap up of everything that's gone on that month, interesting things to talk about, highlight things that have gone on Human Factors Cast, things that have gone on my podcast, other interesting things in the news, whilst everybody's drinking wine.
Ooh.
So wine or beer, just having a few drinks, like a few people in the room, what's gone on, what's been really interesting, and what's been like really gross, whatever. All human factors related or ergonomics related, but with some wine and beer, maybe cheese and nibbles.
You've seen that program, Drunk History? We could do Drunk Human Factors.
See, I was trying to think of some sort of subtle name, but yeah, why not just go out with it and just put it out there exactly what it is?
It's parody, right? That's what we can claim.
The human factors at the conference bar. So.
Networking. We just call it networking.
So networking in speech marks.
All right. I do want to get to some of these show notes. So this is the pre-show. This is where we loosen up. We get everybody. This is where we really should have alcohol before the main show. And we're talking tonight about AI in the classroom. Is that fair to say? That's what the title says.
Yeah, pretty much.
So we got some show notes here. It looks like we're mostly done. I do want to get to it came from, and Frank, I'm really excited that you're here because I want to get some questions that you're just itching to answer. Let's see here.
Yeah.
I've added some extra ones in. That's cool. Into the bank.
I've got some notes to add to the show notes as well. I'll get that in there for you.
Good. Let me go through some of these it came froms that we have here. I'll put it over here so everyone. It looks like I'm looking at everyone. So here's some interesting ones. This one I don't want to mention on the show, but I do want to just call it out because it's cool. There's this There's a Reddit post, I guess, on user experience by, I'm going to mess up the name here. Where'd it go? I just clicked on it. There is a cool one from user experience. If I could find it, there it is. It's called 200 Tools for Product People. And it supposedly is a collection of tools that have been put together by product managers, curated for product managers. And while it is product managers putting this together, there's a lot of really cool resources that are not necessarily product manager tools. I'm going to actually share my screen right now for anyone listening on the other way that we present this information. Our patrons get the audio version of this. So I'm going to describe best I can what you're looking at here. So there's a collection of tools, and they break it down by category. So you have things like A/B testing or analytics or collaboration, changelog publishing, design, documentation, all the way down to user testing, user research, user onboarding. So there's a lot of different tools here. And if you were to click on any one of these, it actually gives you the tools available to you right there. A little bit of clunky interface, as it scrolls down past everything, but it's pretty cool that they have all these things just available for you to check out if you have the ability to sort of impact which tools you're going to use and or have a say in what you use. It's a pretty cool resource for anyone just getting started. So wanted to point that out as just something that you should take a look at.
That's pretty cool. Drag that over here.
Yeah, anyway, getting back to the Reddit stuff. I have one from Patreon that I'm going to read separately. It's not part of this, but it's cool to get that. So we'll read that in the Patreon section. Let's see here. So I have Frank, how do you conduct and analyze research in relation to a product feature? This is person works on one product in-house, used by large companies, and their process usually works on one page, one flow, one process. How does that process differ from doing something holistically, looking at the whole system? Is that something that you want to answer, or are you looking for other things? Like what does Frank want to answer tonight?
I can get that one a crack. It sounds like one for some kind of life cycle, kind of timing your research to where something is in the life cycle, and that's kind of the danger that happens when you're in a little bit more mature processes. There's less time to do research or something disruptive. It's more kind of a rinse and repeat thing. Is that kind of a similar answer to what you were thinking, or something like that?
If we pull this one, I don't know how I'm going to answer. I think. What do you think, Barry?
Yeah, I think it's not the easiest one, is it?
No, it's tricky.
And I think that's maybe why it's well worth bringing out, because I think we'll probably stumble over it a fair bit, and I think it's something because it means different things to different people. It's a bit like there's a one which I quite like the look of as well, which is what exactly are HF skills. Because again, it can be answered in different ways and all that sort of stuff. So
here's what we'll do: we'll grab it, and if we find 3 other ones that we like better, we'll do those. Otherwise, we'll do this one.
Very decisive. I like that.
Okay. I got another one here. Online masters, no experience. I'm going to pass on that one. Looking through. I already talked about the 200 tools. Either of you want to talk about UX and UI and big tech firms?
What's the actual question?
Yeah.
Good question.
What's a big tech firm?
Can
Oh,
anyone
I
talk
see.
about their experiences working in big tech?
Yes, I think that would be quite good because it's pulling in that startup versus a big firm. We have talked about this a fair. Well, we've touched on it a fair bit in the past few weeks of having, you know, how a startup you have to be across more of it, whereas in a big firm you could be a bit more specific. But again, it's a message that's worth repeating.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's see if there's better ones here. There's medical HFE places to work without a ton of travel. I don't know if now that I'm looking at that, I don't know if that's a good question here.
It's very location specific. Well, because it's about travel. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
What exactly are HF skills? I do like this one. I tend to preference the ones that come from the human factors subreddit. So I think we're gonna do this one first and foremost. This one is like number one.
Yeah, I like that.
Number one. Okay. So we have two now. We have what exactly is human factors and how do you conduct and analyze research in relation to a product feature? Let's look for one more here. I like this last one here. Advice on making designs that are easier for devs to follow. I think beyond that, it's how do you communicate with the developers to how do you yeah, exactly. How do you communicate design to developers?
Yeah. Yeah, because we can get into everything around agile to style guides to all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the liberal use of munitions when they get it wrong and you need to get a new team.
I think that makes sense to me. Okay. So let's do that one. All right, so it looks like we got our little questions here. We'll sandwich it. Let's see here. Hey, Frank, have you had a chance to add in a one more thing at the end?
Ooh, I just realized something new I want to add into one more thing as well.
Yeah. I just add one more things all the time, and then I usually pick whichever one is more relevant.
Yeah.
Now I've just found out I'm chairing another webinar.
Oh, geez, yeah. Hang on, I got to put that in there while you've reminded me.
I think of one here.
Oops. Yeah, I got to put that in there. So I don't know if that's official yet or not, so I'm not going to say it out loud, but that's the thing. And I'll put that last, actually, because I, again, don't want to accidentally slip and say it. Okay. Cool. So I think we're good on show notes, right? Because we have the recommended one where Frank and I talk about how Google is improving virtual classrooms. That was a fun episode. Yeah. What's going on with you guys? Anything new, fun, exciting? Frank, you getting into the spooky season?
Oh yeah, starting to share the David S. Pumpkins videos with my teammates. They love it. I think there's a happy. We've been doing the company's been doing kind of various like virtual happy hours and things. I want to see if I can get my hands on some kind of David S. Pumpkins themed kind.
Now, Barry, are you familiar
Costume.
with Mr. Pumpkins?
No.
Okay.
So presumably this is an Americanism that I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Well, Saturday Night Live is anyway. You got to do yourself a favor, and
Okay.
Tom
and
Hanks.
maybe even we. It is the season. It is the season. So why don't you just do yourself a favor and just Google David S. Pumpkins? Maybe we could focus you for a little reaction shot here. Here we'll focus Barry for a little reaction shot here for
So is
David S. Pumpkins here in the pre-show. For anyone unaware,
Okay,
David-
that's cool.
if it's Tom Hanks, you're in the right place.
Yeah.
So for anyone unaware, this is a Saturday Night Live skit that aired a couple years ago. I think it was, 2017, 2018? Right now, Barry is watching the magic happen. And we are watching his reaction.
I
and
like
hearing his
that.
reaction.
That suit's amazing. I need me one of them. Okay. Yeah, I now feel educated.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's more in the video, and I think
You're good at finding blockages, but
there you go.
Yeah, that one. I tried to find the whole mute bit of that. There we go. I can mute that.
Maybe you watch the video later. I don't know how good it makes for an audio podcast for our patrons. But
Just the reaction of people laughing over it.
Family friendly, right?
I can't see what could probably go wrong with that.
yes.
Oh, right. So let's move that away. Cool. Yeah, so I'm quite looking forward to next week, really, because we're having hopefully a small social gathering. If it's warm enough, well, I don't really care. We live in the UK, so it's going to rain. We just deal with that. But it's just going to be so nice just to do something. We really like to do the Halloween party every year, and it's been such a while since we've done it that I'm just looking forward to it. But again, you still feel kind of nervous and things like that because cases are rising again in the UK and things like that. So you're like, how many people should you be inviting? We're gonna have to do it outside pretty much, and that means it's gonna be really cold. So
require like proof of vaccination or anything, or
well, pretty much, I think.
Okay.
I'm gonna assume that everybody makes up their own their COVID passport, and we'll mandate that. And I guess we could have a prize for the most imaginative COVID passport.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So
can you dress up your COVID passports for Halloween?
Scary COVID so I guess if you do that, then you go for scary COVID passports. All everybody's going to do is draw pictures of the COVID virus on their passport, aren't they? Because that's the scariest thing you could do with it. Or is that just me?
You could put devil horns on it or something, right? I mean, I don't know. You mentioned rain. It's really rainy up here in the Pacific Northwest, and I just changed climates pretty recently. Frank, how are things down in San Diego?
Oh my gosh, the on Pacific Northwest.
The unrelenting sunshine state.
I was talking in a meeting, like a working group meeting, and my voice started to go, and that I've never experienced that before, and I was wondering what was going on. And at the bottom right in most computers, they have this the weather report. So I was looking at the weather report, and it said 85, and I clicked on it, 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and it said 8% humidity with 15-mile-an-hour winds. So what happens is the Santa Ana winds come in from the desert. And that's what starts a lot of the fires in California. It causes like a matchstick effect of this dry air. And so the air was literally the dry air was really taken out of my voice. So we look forward to seeing moisture again and rain.
That doesn't
You guys had quite a significant downpour a couple weeks ago, didn't you?
Oh yeah, there was it was actually tied to a Monday night football game. So there's this team in Los Angeles that built a $5 billion stadium, and then they were closed due to lightning. I said, well, and it was in a closed stadium, kind of like a cabana almost. So it wasn't technically a dome, but because it had some open air, they had to call it off a delay for lightning for 2 to 3 hours. So you build a $5 billion stadium and you don't put a lightning rod on top of it. It's like if someone is like, oh, it's not going to ever lightning in this part of the country, and it just happened to.
I would say, how much does a lightning rod cost? $100, something like that.
Yeah,
at that point, just like get somebody out there, get an emergency contractor out there to weld one on top for you. I mean,
or just to stand on top with an umbrella or something.
There you go.
So interestingly, I've started to take an interest in American football, and so I watched my first game. I can't even remember. I think it was Cowboys versus somebody else, and I'm trying to learn the rules of your football game. It's very.
We call it soccer here. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, don't do that. That screwed my head up a lot. I don't really follow soccer in the UK. I'm more into rugby and things. And so I've always thought that American football is basically just a slightly wetter version of our rugby. But actually, seeing some of the hits that go down in American football, they're brutal. And guys really, because everything is so fast all of the time. I'm really impressed with sort of the fitness levels and stuff. So now I've just got to learn the rules and work out actually why they're all running around and why everybody seems to change off every 2 minutes when they get a bit tired. But I'll get there. I shall report progress through the weeks.
Good. You're probably further along than I am. I don't have awareness of American football. Well, that's not true. I do have some awareness. I mean, I keep track of like the political side of things, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Okay. Yeah.
The statements being made, the people getting fired, that kind of thing.
The fun stuff.
Yeah, the fun stuff. I am familiar a little bit with the rules. I know there's 4 quarters, and I know you get the football from one end to another, and a touchdown is worth 7 or 8. Maybe, I don't know. This is somebody who is unfamiliar with sports talking about sports, so I might say some really dumb stuff here. But 7 or 8 points.
Yeah.
And then if you do it through the field goal, that is, at least I know what a field goal is, right? That's 3 points,
that's right.
Maybe,
that's good.
or more. I don't know.
It's I was really impressed with the fact that you've got this idea that they've got to make 10 yards in 4 plays. So I understood that bit. But what's great is on the TV, you can also see the lines. So they superimpose the lines onto the pitch. So you've got the line where they started and where 10 meters, 10 yards. It must be yards because you don't believe in meters, do you? So you got to go 10 yards. That's fine. But then on the pitch, you sort of keep forgetting that actually on the pitch, they don't have the lines on the pitch. Because you can't draw them on. You've actually got the people stood at the edges with the big, either big triangles or big markers or big sticks, whatever they are.
It's a 10-foot chain, 10-yard chain.
10-yard chain. That was it. Yes,
it's a physical chain link. Yeah.
And I was sort of like, it wasn't until I sort of realised that I then started spending part of one game ignoring the game completely, just watching these guys with this big chain and the sticks and stuff. Like that looks like hard work. Constantly being on the ball with that, or on the chain, I guess is as you call it. But yeah, I just found it fascinating, and the fact that they wear the helmets, but it's not just helmets; they've got gum shields and they've got visors as well as the guards, and they've got like towels tucked into the back of the shorts just in case the hands get a bit or the ball gets a bit damp. And I was like, how can you do such a brutal game and still have a nice towel just tucked into the back of your shorts just in case? Yeah, it's it just seems to be a whole lot of contradiction. But it's been fascinating.
At one point, I was talking with a colleague about potentially setting up a Human Factors of Sports podcast that I would not be a part of. I would do the production of and happily provide resources for, but I could not host something like that. He was just way too busy to even consider it, but it was always some fun idea that we poked around.
Well, it's interesting. I interviewed somebody this week, a guy from Australia, guy called Professor Paul Salmon, and he's well written and all that sort of stuff. And I was sort of like digging into, so why did he get into human factors in the first place? And it started off by the fact it got into football boot design as part of a degree course or something, and was just inspired by this football boot design that then launched him into being quite a prolific writer, author, and very successful human factors practitioner. So that's now becoming a little thing now, I think, for other things. Is, you know, what was that momentous time? What was that one tipping point that meant that you became a human factors practitioner?
Yeah, that's like a good origin story. We got time. We got little time. Frank, what's your origin story?
I think it depends. No, it was actually literally that. I was in a class with Professor Wickens, and he had this amazing ability to. I hope this is okay to say on LinkedIn. They had projection screens back then, and you know, like, what do you call those little pieces of plastic paper? Projection sheets.
Overhead projectors.
Overhead projectors. And he was able to stand behind on the screen with the overhead projector shining in his face and still do the lecture, like as if he was immune to the bright light for that. And so I think just learning, just going through that chapter, something just kind of clicked. All those different chapters in that engineering psychology book for me, and I said, well, gosh, this is it. And it's one of those things where, yeah, it would kind of, they call it flow, where time kind of just slows down if you're working on something and you're really getting into it, and then just realize, wow, that's kind of something I'd like to keep trying and doing.
Cool.
Barry, I don't know if I've asked you what your origin story is.
Mine's fairly simple. So my degree was in sort of command and control and software and things like that, but I was always interested in the user interface, and I always wanted to spend time on getting that right before doing any of the code, which infuriated my lecturers. But then, anyway, went into industry, primarily as a software engineer, but then joined an aviation cockpit research group, and so was lucky enough to be involved in projects that got into aviation cockpit design, got involved in a bunch of research programs. And then turned around and said, I don't want to do software, I want to do human factors. And my boss at the time was like, well, it takes a long time to get to. And then got made redundant from that job and went and got another job somewhere else as a human factors practitioner. And haven't really looked back. At some point, I should really do some, like, I don't know, qualifications or something like that in it. But 20 years on, I think I've kind of missed that boat. So I'm now just living that vicariously, that I've got my wife to do her human factors master's degree at the moment, and so I'm just looking over her shoulder as she's doing all this stuff. And our evenings now consist of talking about the relative merits of NASA TLX and what does a good task analysis look like. I mean, how much more romantic can you get now?
That's some excellent pillow talk, I gotta say.
So I just realized that could go a completely different direction, but yeah, we're about to go live.
let's hold it. Yeah. If you are watching with us on any one of our platforms, first off, thank you for joining us. Second off, don't go anywhere, because we're about to actually start the real show for real, where the music goes away and we actually have some real thoughtful discussion about human factors topics. Tonight's topic, of course, is can artificial intelligence impact the way that we learn? And we'll get to the real show here in just a moment, and I'm stalling for time so that way we can start right on the 30. But Frank, don't worry about any audio recording tonight, or you can do it all through Restream now, so we're good there. And aside from that, I think we'll be right back with the show proper. So stick with us, and we'll be right back. I guess that's as good an intro as any. Anyway, be right back.
Welcome to Human Factors Cast, your weekly podcast for human factors, psychology, and design.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Human Factors Cast. This is episode 223. We're recording this live on October 21st, 2021. I'm your host, Nick Roome. I'm joined today by two wonderful people. We got Barry Kirby.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, Barry. Thank you for joining us. And also on the line, we also have Frank Lacson.
Hey, glad to be here.
Thanks for being on the show, Frank. You haven't been on since, I think I was looking at it. It was, episode 197 or something? You were right before our 200 extravaganza.
Yeah, I'm in that epoch, the pre-200 epoch.
Pre-200. We got a great show for you all tonight. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence in the classroom, and later we're going to answer some questions from the community about some really great things like, what does it mean to be human factors? I think that's one of them. Anyway, I didn't write them in the show notes. There you go. That's what I get for overlooking. Anyway, what exactly are human factor skills? How do you conduct and analyze research in relation to a product feature? And what is some advice on making designs that are easier for developers to follow? But first, got some programming notes. There's not going to be a show next week. Stick around, though. They're always pleasant surprises, maybe. Anyway, we'll be back on the 4th of November for sure. Maybe a pleasant surprise next week. Who knows? Anyway, we're not going to be here live doing this. We are now streaming on LinkedIn. So if you're for the first time through our channel tonight, so if you're watching on LinkedIn, thank you. Welcome all new LinkedIn viewers. We also have Human Factors Minute available for everyone outside of Patreon for, I guess, the first time a couple weeks ago. Now it's been out there. Anyway, it's 86 episodes available to you, and we'll talk about Patreon a little bit later. And of course, we have some conference coverage coming up, so stay tuned for that. But right now, it's time that we get into Human Factors News. That's right. This is where we talk about everything related to the field of human factors. It's fair game for us to talk about. Barry, what do we have up this week?
So this week we're looking at new research showing that learning is more effective when active. So the COVID-19 pandemic necessitated a really quick diversion into remote learning styles, with lots of schools, colleges, and universities having to deliver remote learning online, and suddenly very keen to adapt and exploit new technologies. So students faced negative psychological effects in isolation, restlessness, and inattention brought on by quarantine and remote learning. Therefore, the interest in new teaching technologies and methods has been very popular. So the faculty from Carnegie Mellon University's Human-Computer Interaction Institute, through their research, concluded that engaging students through interactive activities, discussions, feedback, and AI-enhanced technologies resulted in improved academic performance compared to traditional lectures, lessons, or readings. So the research also found that active learning methods use not only hands-on, minds-on approaches, but also hearts-on approaches, providing increased emotional and social support. Specifically, the research found that incorporating an AI-based virtual helper to question students, encourage them to think critically, and engage them in discussions increased learning in hands-on activities, whilst also supporting teachers. The research was performed by controlled experiments to see how much children learn whilst interacting with a mixed reality learning platform, where children perform and interpret real-world experiments with personalized interactive feedback, with the artificial intelligence turned on and off. When it was turned off, the students learned far less. So the pandemic made it quite clear that traditional approaches to education may not be the best way to learn, but the questions have persisted around what active learning is, how best to use it, and how to excite students. So Frank, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my initial thought is a little bit of irony. If you remember, some of our a lot of studies have shown on different technologies, especially smartphones, have caused people to become more isolated. So you saw a lot of that in the news articles and other kinds of studies. And to see that technology is bringing students together and having people connect and be active, that's really good. And that shows that it's not technology's fault. It's just the designers of technology and how people adapt to it is what we need to kind of study. It also reminds me of that. It's kind of one of those classic human factors principles, the Yerkes-Dodson law, which describes a kind of bell-shaped relationship between pressure and performance. And I wonder if some of our time in the pandemic has caused a shift to move towards the passive side, and a lot of the students are perceiving negative impacts on that. And I think AI is doing a great job nudging forward people various students across that curve to more optimal kind of performance level. I think Barry, you mentioned I think in the pre-show doing some of the work in your origin story on some kind of aviation kinds of things. Have you ever seen that Yerkes-Dodson law, pressure performance kind of relationships in some of the work that you've been experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of one of these things, isn't it, that it's almost so obvious that that it just gets wrapped into everything you're doing, and you need to be able to put things in a way that really reduces the amount of pressure on that cognitive load more than anything else, and the ability to carry out them sort of tasks. So, yeah, I'm completely with that. You can see how it plays out. So, Nick, from your perspective, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have it facetiously in the show notes, and in other no duh news, the sky is blue. Look, I think there's been a lot of advances in artificial intelligence lately that may not be, or it might be actually. We'll get to this in just a minute, but it might not be as perceptible to the public as they realize. Even simple things like little learning apps like Duolingo or any of these other little language learning or just trying to learn a new skill. Often artificial intelligence is going on behind the scenes that will present context-based knowledge to the user based on their previous responses. And I have a fun little anecdote about Duolingo that we can talk a little bit about later. But I do want to talk briefly about social thoughts. So if you are watching live, there's still time to answer our social thought. We are, of course, talking about AI and learning this week. And so tonight's social thought is, have you encountered AI when trying to learn something new? If so, where was it? And was it successful? As of right now, we are at 100% yes. We don't have any responses yet as to where those things were successful and how was it successful. But 100% yes, which is a little surprising to me. So we'll see how that changes throughout the show, if at all. I think we can kind of take a step back. This is an interesting article, but I do want to kind of cover some ground here on generic backgrounds on learning and education. Frank, you and I covered this a little bit in the episode that you were on last. I think it was 197 or something like that. I'll get an exact number on that. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about how artificial intelligence is feeding education, and then we'll come back to the article discussion. Barry, do you want to talk a little bit about this article by Nancy Fenton? It's on Psych Learning Curve.
If I had it up in front of me and I had lost it, then yes, I would.
Here, I'll lay it out for you. So there's an article here that we're going to use as supplemental material here. There's two articles that we're going to use as supplemental material. This one's 20 psychological principles that are kind of impact learning, right? And so it's broken down by a couple categories. I figure maybe we can go down this list and kind of talk about just a couple that stand out to us. In the show notes, I've highlighted my picks, but anything that stands out to either of you, Barry, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think I'm quite like the relates to this story around feedback, and it is very much there around. You've got to close that loop of student, you teaching something to a student and then them feeding it right back to you, that they've understood it and actually thoroughly understand it, and they're not just repeating back. And I guess this is where that AI piece comes in, because it allows a lot more of that done on a personal level. So yeah, I think that feedback for me is probably I think that one of the key things in there that this sort of technology can play with.
How about you, Frank? Anything that stands out on that list to you?
Yeah, what's starting to ring a bell is the context, the classroom conduct, and especially expectations and support. Uh, and it's one of those things being in more of this kind of online environment, I think has really changed uh, what the expectations and support are. Where, for gosh, maybe hundreds of years, we've had a certain way of doing things that's been ingrained year after year. Do this way, sit in your seat, uh, pay attention when you tell you to pay attention, that kind of thing. And now this whole online environment has given a lot more freedom from that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of adaptation and calibration that's going on with many different students. And some students are doing well. Some students need maybe technology assistance to kind of help calibrate some of that. And maybe some students are thriving. It's one of those things we talk about negative effects. Maybe for some things that are some students are not used to or not suitable, at least in their mindset for kind of in classroom kind of experience, are doing quite well. So it'd be interesting to see any kind of unintended data that comes out from all this time here separate.
Yeah, this list is interesting. So there's this is kind of like an overview of learning, and it has a lot of various attributes here, right? We're talking cognition, and I'm talking high level concepts here. There's 20 total. I'm not going to go over all of them. I think we've picked out some good ones already, but there's cognition and learning, there's motivation, social and emotional considerations, context, and assessment. Frank, you brought up some great points about context. I want to talk briefly about the social component of this and assessment, because Barry covered cognition. We can get into motivation if we want, but I think the social considerations are interesting from a perspective where you are dealing with an artificial intelligence. That social component kind of goes out the window, or does it? You're then interacting with a virtual agent in some regard, right? I mean, it is presenting you information that is more relevant to you. It might not necessarily be interacting with you like a human might, but there's still some sort of human robot teaming going, or human AI teaming going on behind the scenes that is going to need to be taken into consideration. I think that would fit under this category of social and emotional dimensions, at least in terms of dealing with virtual agents. Then you have the other attribute of assessment, and this is, I think, where AI can really shine, because if you have formative and summative assessments of some learners, I'm trying to make it fairly ubiquitous here. Some learners' ability, right? You have formative and summative assessments. There's different approaches that can be taken for each of these, and I think AI can really provide a useful input to these types of assessments, because you might have you can evaluate effectiveness of some sort of intervention, and then alter course, and then evaluate that, and then alter course again to give this personalized sort of learning curriculum for the learner. So I did want to touch on those. I'm going to do circle one more time. Barry, any of these other attributes stand out to you that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I actually want to push the assessment thing a bit further, because I think this could be a really big thing, that not only can you sort of keep an eye on how things are going, but actually we could really change the way we look at how we assess a lot of these courses, because we spend a lot of time obsessing over what grade did you get at the end. Largely we'll do either a piece of coursework at the end, or you'll do your exams or whatever. And there's so much pressure on the exams, and actually we can sort of see that the outputs that you get from the exams can be so skewed from what the actual skills of the person are, when fundamentally what we're trying to do is to get a really good understanding of just what are the skills and how capable is that person for either future and the next step of education, or for employment. It's not just for the sake of having a certificate. It's got to be something there. So if we've got these ways that can now assess almost on a continual basis, and on a real small scale, you can actually judge whether a person is just off their game, and it could maybe highlight things like, is there some mental health issues? Are they potentially ill? Something like that. So a real care element on a short-term basis, but actually on a longer-term basis, you will get a much better idea of their capability and capacity, in a way that is, I don't use the word infallible, that's probably gone a bit far, but a much better thing, much better idea than what they were like just on one day in one exam room under whatever pressure, that in an unrealistic situation. So I think that for me would be an absolute real win. But just the final one on the backside of it is the social interaction side of thing worries me to a certain extent, because already we treat the online and offline are two very different things. So even if you're texting somebody, messaging somebody, we think of it as you're talking to a computer, you're talking, and therefore it doesn't have necessarily the same social standing, social kudos as talking to what we call a real person. So me talking face to face to somebody in the street is very different to the way that we're talking now, even though we know that we're real people. Well, I believe you're real people, so I've been told. But I wonder whether we would then, if you got the people sat there talking on the phones all the time, doing text chat on the phones, would this not maybe exacerbate that problem and get us maybe thinking that that a lot more stuff is online and therefore not real? So I think that's just a small flag, but actually I find this story massively interesting for this.
Yeah, Frank, I want to circle back to you. Is there any other attributes of learning and education that you want to highlight here before we move on to talking about specifically AI in education?
I just wanted to second kind of Barry's assessment on some of the formative and summative things. We think of different kinds of users in our human factors field, to kind of not just the end user, but other kinds of maintainers and other kinds of things. So thinking about the teacher as a type of user, being able to use AI to get a summary, say a dashboard summary of how different students are doing, especially in an online environment. And if there's kind of a dip, like we talked about that performance curve, to be able to use interventions, talking to the student, asking challenging questions, and so that way it does so in a very safe manner of kind of, okay, student X is needs a little bit of a nudge. Okay, I'll set a question or call on that student. But also, I think with the interpersonal relationships, the making sure that there's quality interactions, and I think it was Cal Newport, one of the authors that does stuff on digital minimalism, talks about the importance of quality interactions, the difference between clicking like on something versus picking up the phone and talking to a friend you haven't talked to in a while. I think, Nick, we do need to catch up.
Yeah, we do.
But yeah, that's I think nothing more to add on that. It's a lot of great things, a lot of great possibilities, and it's great to see something that's going on that's helping students, especially in these different times.
Yeah, so let's get into this other supplemental article that we have here. This is from Ouyang and Jiao, and I'm probably messing up pronunciation there, so apologies to the authors. But I do want to start this with a little anecdote that kind of fits in well with that assessment piece that we were just talking about. And I mentioned this earlier. So I've been kind of kindling my ability to speak multiple languages. You might not necessarily think of it looking at me, but I have many years of experience speaking Spanish, and I've lost a lot of that ability over time. And sort of one of the things that has rekindled my desire to speak another language is because I've started teaching my son the language too. Now, I'm not like a fluent speaker by any stretch of the imagination, but I know enough to get by. If I were in a foreign country, Mexico, Spain, I could probably get, enough out that I could find the, local market, or I could, find a hospital, or I could get on a plane, or, the essentials. And I think that's really important to do that. Anyway, my little guy, he's young, and I want to encourage that language development as he's young. And so we've started pulling out the Duolingo app. And one fun thing that I noticed, it's kind of serendipitous that we're talking about the story tonight, is that as you get something incorrect in that app, the system will understand that you need to more practice with that, and they will loop that thing that you got wrong back into the practicing that you're doing. And so, if you made just a minor mistake, it'll ask you the same question again, but after other things. It kind of just ropes it back into the curriculum without your knowledge that it's wasn't part of it to begin with. It's just saying, hey, it's subtly having you practice it again just to make sure that you got it right. And there are other subtle nods in that program that are really interesting from a learning perspective that encourage you to sort of revisit the context-based questions and that you got incorrectly. And I'll just leave it at there. I do want to get into this article on education and just a brief overview here. This one kind of breaks down sort of AI in education into 3 different paradigms. And you have AI directed, AI supported, and AI empowered. Maybe we can just break this down one by one and kind of talk about each of these, and then we'll talk about them all together. I don't know. Does that sound okay to you guys?
Works for me. Yeah.
Okay. Frank, why don't you go ahead and talk about paradigm 1? It's at a high level.
Okay. Yeah, so in paradigm 1, the AI is used to represent knowledge models and direct cognitive linking. So the AI will kind of represent the domain knowledge. We talked in that previous article as kind of a buddy that helps the children in the classroom and directs the learning process. While the learner is a little bit more of in a passive mode, acting as a recipient of AI service and following the instructions and the process to follow these specific learning pathways. And it looks like there's a paradigm 2. Barry, you want to talk a little bit how the AI shifts during that phase?
Yeah, so in paradigm 2, the AI and the learner take on more collaborative role with each other. So the AI is effectively relinquishing its control to support the learner as they go through through that learning process. So at a really high level, that's it. It's more of a learning together type approach. Nick, do you want to take us into paradigm 3?
Yes, I will. So in the third one, this is interesting, right? So this is actually empowering learning while the learners themselves are taking agency to learn. And that's a whole complicated sentence of a weird way of saying AI is just using a tool, is used as a tool to augment human intelligence. So it's almost less learning based in that third paradigm and more geared towards augmenting abilities and kind of keeping that intelligence at easily referenceable is at least how I'm understanding it. Frank, I see. Is that might be you? I think. Who wrote that next point there? I want to talk to whoever wrote that next point and get their thoughts on that.
It wasn't me.
Yeah.
Frank, what is this? What is this bullet point, and what do you mean?
Oh, so it was looking at some of the human factors research out there. It talks about what they're called levels of automation. And there are a lot of many good researchers that talk about these different levels, which, especially for informing design, try to set the level of automation based on the capabilities of the user at the time. So for certain levels, the automation would do a lot more of the work, putting the humans maybe a little bit more of a supervisory level, and then when when the humans want, if there's need for the user to do more of the task, the automation serves more of a checker, just to check to see, making sure that the user stays on track with certain parameters. So it's really interesting to see that taken to probably many levels of complexity when AI is concerned, because they're actually representing the models and doing some of the actual learning itself. But it's really, really great to see how those kind of traditional frameworks of automation start to now see itself in this kind of AI work.
Yeah. Barry, any other closing thoughts on this kind of other supplemental article on AI? And then we'll all kind of get back to the original article.
Yeah, this is I've sort of played with these domains before. I've sort of seen them as the what I've read as the teacher, learner, mentor approach. So the teacher is the AI teaching you, the learner is you working together to learn on the journey, and the mentor bit is the learner taking that agency and the AI supporting them. There was a really good book that I would recommend called Virtual Humans Today and Tomorrow by David Burden. And this was all around what does the future of humans look like. And he really goes into a lot of detail around the mentor bit specifically. And the main reason I know about it was because part of the project that they did was they created a virtual Barry. Where they took all that I was in fact apparently still am an online agent where they've taken all of my thoughts, experiences, and things like that. So, but what they've done with that is turn it into a chatbot that can then support as mentoring of individuals. So that whole bit around AI empowering people, I just find absolutely fascinating, and it's really, really something to watch.
Yeah, let's get back to the original article here. So, one kind of thing that I want to make sure we talk about that I thought was really interesting is that they're kind of using AI, at least in the context of this article, for physical hands-on activities. And they're using this tool called Norilla, which is a mixed reality learning platform, um, basically allowing children to interpret real-world experiments. And they get this feedback, and it's an earthquake table, ramps or other physical apparatuses with AI turned on and off. And the idea behind this article is that, as the AI is on, just to remind everybody, they are more successful at learning. So I do want to talk about that. Frank, do you have any thoughts about using this platform now after we've kind of visited all the other supplemental material here?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where uh, I think where some of the individual differences can start putting into play. And so I think when there's being able to turn AI off or have different modes of AI where students can learn, and this is kind of especially helpful in the classroom where you may have students with different abilities, different learning styles, different kind of just baseline abilities, and it's one of those things where teachers I could imagine can kind of struggle making sure that keeping pace with everything. So using the AI to help boost and challenge the students it would be something that would be pretty neat to see in classrooms.
Barry, any other thoughts on this article?
Yeah, I think this is highlighted the fact that there's loads of staffing pressures going on in schools and educational facilities at the moment, and this is a fantastic way of being able to relieve some of that pressure, to be able to get some more directed education towards each individual student based on their own capability, and being able to push them to their own limit much more often. So you'd almost, if it's implemented right, you've got the ability to keep that student constantly engaged and motivated. And somebody who's motivated to learn will learn way more and be more successful, rather than just being droned out from the front of the classroom. But fundamentally, I think this also highlights that I think the traditional educational model is broken. This article talks a lot about active learning and things that you need a lot more resources to do than just stand at the front of a classroom and lecture. If we want to have quality learning, it isn't about how long you spend in an establishment. It's the quality of learning that you get out of it during, and in fact, if we can get people to learn more in a shorter period of time, it makes it way more effective. So I think for me, this shows how technology can have a huge impact and could probably revolutionize what we do. But also we need to take it as a wake-up call about how we are actually teaching people and getting the most value out of that our teaching practices.
You left it on a semi-hopeful note, and I'm going to use that as a springboard to leave it on a somber note. It's often fun for us to sit here and talk about these types of things on a platform. We are, I guess, fortunate enough to have the technology to stream a podcast across the internet to many people. But I think this really does highlight the importance of equity of technology, and to be able to have this sort of equipment in every classroom, and not just the classrooms in the good zip codes or postal codes, but to have this in every classroom and have it be a learning experience that everyone gets access to, I think is a really important thing. And so I'll just leave it with that. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break on that note, and then we'll be right back to see what's going on in the Human Factors community right after this.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our weekly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and Human Factors Minute, a Patreon-only weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember, it depends.
If you normally skip over the Patreon section, don't this time, because there's something else here. So a huge thank you, as always, to our patrons. We did pick up 2 new patrons this month, so we're always happy to have you. And we especially want to thank our honorary Human Factors Cast staff, Michelle Tripp. Patrons like you keep the show running. While we're on the topic of Patreon, I'm going to go off a little bit off script here from our normal Patreon begging to cover this, because it's such a nice letter from one of our new patrons, and I wanted to read it on the show. They write, "Hi, I've been listening to your podcast for months, and I really want to tell you that the show has helped me a lot. I work for a Taiwanese computer manufacturing company as a human factors engineer. It can be frustrating sometimes to be a minority in a design team where most of my coworkers are not quite familiar with human factors and ergonomics, except anthropometry. They need those data to support their design. I was struggling on how to introduce human factors and ergonomics knowledge to my coworkers without making our conversation boring or too hard for a casual chat. And then I found this show. Not only did I gain knowledge from the show, but I also found opportunities to share human factors and ergonomics studies in a less stressful and more interesting way. Thank you for making this wonderful podcast. English is not my first language. Please accept my apologies if there's any grammar error. Best. I'm leaving them anonymous because I didn't ask them if I could use their name. We just got this in today, but I did want to read it. We always love hearing stories like this. I think, one of my goals with this podcast is always to make human factors accessible and fun. And so thank you. Love hearing that from you guys. Speaking of patrons, we're 2 away from being self-sustainable and not incur any out-of-pocket costs. So, we pay for the show ourselves. That's going to pay for things like our hosting fees, our website domain, and our website capability. So anyway, if that's something you want to do, it's out there. Why don't we go ahead and get into this next part of the show we like to call...
It came from...
Yes, it came from this week. It is all Reddit. This is the part of the show where we search over the internet to bring you topics the community's talking about. If you find these answers useful, give us a like wherever you're at to help other people find this content. We have 3 tonight, and we're going to get into them. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to read it. I'm going to pass it to Barry or Frank. Be on your toes, guys. And then we'll pass it to somebody else. So everyone has to be on their toes tonight since it's a 3-headed game. This first one here is, what exactly are human factors skills? This is by IDK witty username from the Human Factors subreddit. Goes to show I don't read these usernames before I say them. As the title says, when you're applying for human factors jobs, what are the skill sets that you guys have or want to have that employers are looking for? I've been told that human factors is a good industry route following completion of my PhD. And I'm going to skip all that. But looking at job postings, it seems a little unclear to me. That's an attainable route. There seems to be a lot of UX design, which I have little experience, although I think there are certain transferable skills and rules. But curious to know what people think, like statistics, coding. Perusing this sub a little bit, it appears that there's a few different sides of human factors. Some sound more attainable than others. Happy to talk about in any other way, just trying to pick people's brains. All right, who's it going to be? Frank, what do you think? What exactly are human factors skills?
I think the first one is empathy. And I know it's something that you don't study, but to understand the users, being able to fundamentally understand what are they going through, task-wise, performance-wise, and that helps with your intuition to be able to see what is the root problem. Because a lot of times in human factors, there are a lot of confounding problems, both technological, organizational, human interaction with technology that are in there. And so to be able to kind of pick through that to help identify the problem will put any kind of human factors practitioner at a good starting point. So that would be my number one draft pick. I think we were talking sports in the pre-show on human factor skills.
It's empathy. All right, who are you going to pass it to, Frank?
Yeah, let's go Barry. Let's see what is the number one pick, I guess.
Can I bring out the word "it depends"? Is that allowed? Yeah, it's no. I mean, fundamentally, it's the and it's one of the reasons I love working in the HF world is that the range of things we can get involved with is so broad. You know, from the physical to the cognitive to the organizational. HCI design, UX design, if you're down with the cool kids, all the way down to physical physical design of an object, and it really depends what you want to get into. But the big thing I like about it is that there is always an excuse for us to get involved. Every project involves people one way or another, even in things like autonomous systems and things like that. There's always a user in the loop somewhere. So we have a really good excuse to go and get involved in anything, do everything. I think for me that there is a lot of like hard skills in terms of what you get, but fundamentally I think you need to be inquisitive. You need to be willing to put forward an argument in a room where you might not be popular. And you've got to be willing to stand your ground, because you're going to get into a lot of discussions, a lot of places where you might be the one lone HF person in the room, but you're right. And you need to tell everybody you're right, because your end user will thank you for it.
Yeah. So you took empathy. You took sort of the it depends route. I'm going to go with the word flexibility. And I'm going to use this as an opportunity to bring up the full saying of Jack of all trades, because no one knows the full saying, or at least they always misquote it. A Jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And I think this is really important when it comes to human factors. I think being flexible is one of the biggest strengths that we have in this field. I was going to go on a tangent about how I always pick in MMOs or video games the class that kind of is best suited for most situations, but is not really hyper focused in one. I'm not going to go that route. I said it, but I think we may be facing like a project management role in one context, or a user research role in another context, or a designer role even in another context. And I think that flexibility to work within your constraints and ultimately put your best foot forward to ensure that you have the empathy for the user, is out there, and that you are putting your best foot forward with the design, and making sure that whatever product you put out there is going to ultimately serve its use case best for the people who are using it. I think that's ultimately what human factor skills are. Okay, that was a long-winded answer. Let's get on to this next question here. How do you conduct and analyze research in relation to a product feature? This is by Mouth Talk on the user experience subreddit. We're going to go Frank again. You thought I was going to switch it up.
Rock, paper, rock. Analyzing research in relation to product. Let's
Oh, I
see.
didn't read the thing.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. That's my bad. Wow, I've been doing this for how many years? This is they write, "Hey everyone, some background on my question." That would help, right? I work in-house on one product used by large companies, and my research/UX process typically consists of working on one page, flow, or process, or feature within the product. I was wondering how the process of research and design typically goes for others in this situation. Lots of materials and advice out there seem to cover end-to-end design or of a full product. Do you find that you'll go through the full process for each project or skip parts? What does your research typically focus on? What methods do you use the most? Curious to see everyone's answers. All right, Frank, we're going with you now that I've given up the full context of this question. How do you conduct and analyze research that is for a specific product feature rather than the whole product?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the reasoning of why uh, uh, one would do research for a certain product feature, it just depends on where the product is in its life cycle. So a lot of times it's easy to assume that, hey, we're designing a system from scratch and we get to do the whole holistic method, or we have time to do our discovery. But sometimes, especially in larger companies and depending on what project that you're on, you have maybe a more mature product and it's a little feature that helps enhance that product. Let's say an incremental feature. So being able to kind of understand where you're at with the life cycle will help the path in conducting the research. And once you, especially for a specific product, you want to kind of follow more standards based kinds of things versus research, because there's things that are maybe already built or established rules and best practices for that. And then being able to use those findings to help towards the bigger research effort. So it's a lot of the scoping effort, and once you apply the scoping and the constraints, say like filters on a spreadsheet of processes and tools, you can kind of find the ones that work best for you in your toolkit. Um, Nick, what are your thoughts on this product feature?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, when I'm approaching just a product feature, I'm going to say it depends, but I think largely what I'll do is kind of understand the context of that feature in the larger either workflow or product that it belongs to. I think understanding that context really helps with sort of outlining exactly what you need to do to research that thing, right? Do you need to do a deeper analysis because this is a standalone product, or it is a product feature in this case? So I guess it would be, what exactly do I need to research? Frank, you mentioned, you there might be things that are already established for a product, certain design standards, design guidance that exists already that you don't have to think so hard about this specific feature. So, I'd focus more on things like workflow, or how they get to that product, the entry points and exit points from that product feature, from other parts of the product as a whole. That's kind of my short answer. Barry, I'm going to pass it over to you. What do you think? How do you tackle this problem?
Yeah, I'll take that. I mean, alongside the stuff that that you've both said, I sort of go about. I take a lot from agile approaches in this. That I tend to have a mantra of scope, size, and maturity, which means that scoping it. What is the scope of what you're talking about? Is what you're getting manageable? Does it give itself to a good user story in of its own right, or is it more of an epic? So an epic, a number of use cases pulled together. So have you got things down? Can you derive it down to either a use case or a set of use cases? What is the size of the overall piece? Is it very large, small? Are you talking about the an entire product, or are you talking about a small element of it? And that really allows me to sort of determine what sort of products I want, what sort of methods and tools I want to bring into play. Then the final thing is maturity. Is it something I just need to tweak? Is it something that's got a lot of work in and I just need to push it slightly forward in a new way? Or is it broken and I get the joy of ripping it to shreds and starting again? So I guess mine is really influenced by the fact I tend to do a lot of, I guess, firefighting rather than starting many products from scratch. And so I tend to go in and have a fairly almost strict analysis way of going through and being able to look at my scope size and maturity and then be able to apply what I want to do. I've found just through hard experience being able to do that saves me so much time at the far end, because I can set expectation and I can set my own expectation as well as the client's.
Good answer. Speaking of basically research side of things, let's talk about turning that research into design, and then specifically this next question here: advice on making designs that are easier for developers to follow. This is went wrong at prom from the user experience subreddit. Don't even want to know what that means. Current student, relatively new to UX and UI. I've been working with a small team of developers on a startup. Want to make their life easier by translating my designs to an actual product. I've been using an 8-point grid so far, but I'm not sure what else I can do to streamline the process. Does anyone have advice on optimizing dev handoff? Things I should avoid doing in my designs, tools that may help? Thank you. All right, we went with Frank for the first two. Who are we going to go with for the last one? It's going to be Barry.
Well, nobody saw that one coming, did they?
No.
I guess the first thing I would sort of say from my perspective is don't hand it off. If you can, try and get part of the team, work with the devs alongside them, because if you can, the best teams I've ever worked with is when you can get the whole team together, where you've got the dev and the devs and yourselves working as part of that same. Again, I guess I'm leaning towards Agile in a certain way, but this existed way before Agile did, I guess, really. So I tend to use things. So Figma is a great thing where you can actually, you do designs, but you can actually demonstrate them designs. So show the devs what it is that you're really wanting to achieve, not just the actual graphics, but use that presentation mode, which is really powerful, to be able to flow and show them what your intent is, not just the actual hard design, but what is it you're trying to achieve. Basic things, style guides and things like that. Get a lot of the basic stuff done and out the way. Use that. Sometimes you think for a small project, developing a style guide and things can be a real pain. You just want to get on and do the good juicy stuff, but it actually saves you time, I think, in the long term. But fundamentally, no matter what you do, get everybody in the same room and communicate. I worry when I see comments like, I want to hand it off like that hot potato. Actually bring them in closer, give them a nice hug, tell them what you want. Anybody else do that, or is it just me?
Oh, I love that. Frank, I'm going to punt to you. What do you do in this situation?
Yeah, I kind of have a similar approach to Barry, having conversations. And that's probably one of the agile kind of best practices or principles, is that having a conversation allows you to understand what the developer needs. So if you treat the developer as another user or an internal customer, you'll get their user needs, you'll get their pain points, you'll get feedback on the way you're doing things, and it's best to not just a Slack chat or an email. It's the pick up the phone. We've talked about deep levels of communications, or I guess Slack call, huddle, Teams call, whatever you have to get the other person on the line and hearing their voice, because you can pick up a lot of the social cues on how things are going. Fine doesn't always mean fine, and good doesn't always mean good, and so to get that kind of feedback and tailor your processes and tools. There's a lot of tools out there that you can pick from, but it's a lot of the themes I've said, a lot of these other things, it's the soft skills and using those tools and getting that art of finding what tools to use that will help set someone for success. Nick, you have any additional thoughts on this one here?
Yeah, the only thing I want to add to this is, okay, I understand it's best to include them in the process. I completely agree. That's how I operate too. However, I'm going to approach this in the handoff direction. So I think the one thing you want to consider here, if you are handing off, again, best practice is to not do that, but do it in a way where you provide as much information and context as possible. Make a very thick document that would encourage them to sit down and meet with you next time, because they don't want to sit down and read through this whole thing. But also, make this a standalone product. Make it, hey, users were saying X, Y, and Z, back it with user data, and say that, this is a required feature or component that you need in order to satisfy user needs. So bring in the actual data, and then as you're talking about designs itself, so you've given them the context with the data, when you're presenting the designs itself, make sure you list out every single interaction as it should be, and if you can, down to the specifications of like transitions on if you're talking about strict interaction design, what the cursor speed and all these other things, the very specific attributes of your design, the color codes, everything. That way you are eliminating possibilities that they mistake what you have given them as some sort of rough approximation, and they now will take that as the ground truth. And that's my best advice if you do hand it over. Again, best practice is to kind of go with the, hey, come over here. I'm going to give you a hug. We're going to take a look at this. You're going to ask me any question you need to, because we are best buds. All right. That is all for the It Came From section. We're going to get into this last part of the show. Needs no introduction. It's one more thing. This is where we talk about just one more thing. Barry, what's going on with you?
I'm going to take my one more thing and split it in half. So it might look like two more things, but it's not. It's just two halves of the same thing. So in a couple of weeks, on the 3rd of November, I'm chairing a Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors webinar with Mark Sajan, Paul Salmon, and Rachel Poole, talking about using artificial intelligence in healthcare. So we'll be publishing that, all the details for that fairly soon. But if you're interested in learning more about that, there's just been a white paper published, and it's really actually, from a geek perspective like me, really interesting. So I'm really chuffed to be asked to chair that. But my true one more thing is I've just had to buy a new washing machine. And a washing machine for me just washes clothes, and that's brilliant. Does it but it's Bluetooth enabled. As in, I've now got an app for the washing machine. Do I need an app for the washing machine? And I've got the same for the dishwasher. And in fact, somewhat now the clothes dryer doesn't have an app. I almost feel like that's a bit left out. I kind of think we're going all over the top with the level of apps that are required.
Can I ask what the app does? Like, is it just a interface? Like, is there no interface on the physical device, or is it all app?
No,
what does it do?
There's the usual interface. There's the usual controls on the front of the washing machine, but this apparently will allow me to check where it is in its cycle, which I'll know because if it's stopped, I know it's finished. If it's still going and making noises, it's still going. Apparently, this one might allow me to set it off remotely. So, which in theory sounds good. I can sort of see that. However, I have to go to the physical machine, turn it into remote mode. So I have to fill it. We say, you got to put your clothes in and your detergent and all that sort of stuff. Then set it in remote mode, go to another part of my house, wherever, and then access the app on my phone. It's got to be within Bluetooth range, and then set it going on its remote cycle. When actually, if I'd loaded it, I could have just pressed go before I left. Instead of putting it into remote mode, I'd have just put it into a normal mode. So, yeah, I like this idea. I love geek. I complete gadget geek, and I think everything like that is amazing. But I just can't help thinking, I don't think my washing machine needs its own app.
Like, look, I get the use case for a dryer, right? You're sitting in bed, and you still have a load in there from last time, and you want warm socks or whatever, and you just hit it while you're on your phone. And that to me makes sense, but a washing machine, weird. Frank, what's your one more thing this week?
Yeah, it was actually involves a trip to Costco. And so I got these new earbuds, and I was just kind of trying them out. And just kind of walking along the aisle. And usually when I go to Costco or any kind of grocery store with a common layout, I'm just kind of in my own world, just on autopilot. But they changed the snack section. I get these like mixed nuts or beef jerky at this Costco because the holiday season is coming. And so the snack section is usually right before the registers at the Costco where I shop at. But then I just didn't know what to do. There goes my mental model, as I said. But I was actually listening in these earbuds to a previous version of this episode of the podcast on mental models and cognitive models. I think that you two have gone. So it was kind of a whoa, okay, calm down. my mental model has changed. I'll listen to the podcast and kind of get some tips and tricks on what to do. So it was really more of a coincidence and kind of a funny thing since it happened recently, and now I'm here to talk about it. So that was a cute coincidence there.
That's funny that you were listening to the mental model one when that happened. My one more thing is I guess let's see here. So I had. Are you familiar that the Pixel 6 event was earlier this week? I think it was on Tuesday.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Y'all gadget geeks. So here's my I've wanted this phone since they announced it back earlier this year. Because it's time for an upgrade, and mine's from 2017, which isn't that long ago, but it's long enough. And it's only got 64 gigabytes of storage on it, and I desperately need more for the type of things that I'm doing now. Like, podcasting and storing media on my actual phone. Anyway, so let me describe to you the launch experience of the Pixel 6 Pro. So you sit down, you watch an hour-long video on YouTube by Google about the phone. You get super hyped, super excited about the new product. And then you spend 2 more hours on Google's broken store trying to order this product, getting frustrated because it is bouncing stock around because the store is broken. It couldn't accurately identify to me what things were in stock. So I wanted the 512 gigabyte black version because that is just it's the only version that has the 512 gigabytes, and I want a lot of storage. But then I also wanted it in this package called the Pixel Pro Pass, which includes things like their Game Pass and YouTube Premium and the cloud storage, which all of those things I use. Well, maybe not the games yet, but maybe I will. Anyway, it's a package that saves you money over the long term. So I was trying to get all this stuff together, and it was an awful experience. But I'm super happy. I stuck with it. And one hit on my credit report later because I have to get it through Google's financing accounts. Anyway, I got it, and it'll be here next month, and I'll report back on that. But I'm very thankful that I was able to stick through it for 3 hours trying to get that phone on a Tuesday. Anyway, yeah, that's it. I got more fun, exciting things to talk about next week for one more thing. But before we get out of here, I just want to say, well, we got a couple more votes in. It's still 100% yes for learning with AI, which is interesting to me. Not a single person said no as of this recording. 5:27 p.m. on a Thursday evening Pacific. All right, well, that's going to be it for today, everyone. If you like this episode, we invite you to check out episode 196. I've been quoting it wrong this entire time, where Frank and I talk about how Google is improving virtual classrooms, and comment wherever you're listening on what you think of the story this week. For more in-depth discussion, you can always join us on our Slack or Discord communities. Visit our official website, sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date with all the latest Human Factors news. If you like what you hear, you want to support the show, there's a couple things you can do. 1, leave us a 5-star review. That's completely free for you to do. You can do that right now in whatever podcast app you're in. 2, tell your friends about us. Word of mouth really helps the show grow. And 3, you can always consider supporting us on Patreon. Again, we are 2 away from being self-sustainable, everyone. Let's get there. And as always, links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. I want to thank Mr. Barry Kirby for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about artificial intelligence?
On Twitter, you can find me at Baz_K, or you can search for 1202 The Human Factors Podcast, where I'm at my new shiny website, www.1202podcast.com.
And Mr. Frank Lacson, where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about education and learning?
Hello, the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. F. Lacson is my screen name there.
As for me, I've been your host, Nick Roome. You can find me streaming on Twitch every Monday for office hours across social media at Nick_Roome. Thanks again for tuning in to Human Factors Cast. Until next time, it depends. If you are hanging out with us, hang out with us just for a little while longer. We're going to do a post show here. Let me turn on the future pop music. We'll get the post show caption going. There we go. That was fun, guys. I was a little it's always what's the for storming forming
The team forming thingy.
Norming.
I felt like we got to norming pretty quick, but it was a little bit of storming at the beginning.
Well, we didn't hit each other, and there was there's no major fighting or disagreements, which is a bit disappointing, really. But there we go.
You've been watching too much American football.
Hey, Barry, you mentioned you follow rugby. Did you ever play any?
Yeah, unfortunately, Unfortunately, I did obviously at college and university. I played a bit, but then I got a shoulder injury, but then got into rugby coaching, and so I coached a few teams, and for a good few years actually, and particularly into men's rugby, but also women's rugby as well. My wife decided she wanted to play, and so she said, "We need a coach for a team." I was like, "Okay, I can recommend. So I can go and find somebody who'll do it." She goes, "No, you misunderstand. You're going to coach our team." Okay, I'll do that then. And so I spent a few years rugby coaching as well. So
That's
What's,
awesome. I used to play, and for me it was a neck injury. That's why I don't know if during the show you see me kind of creaking my neck a little bit. So I kind of took not so much shoulder but neck for me. But it was a lot of fun, really fun, very respectful culture in terms of the how the game is played, which is a lot of people don't realize it.
yes.
What's one piece of advice from a coach that you would give for general life advice based on rugby?
Make sure you've always got a drink to hand. That's probably from my best. I guess from the more serious bit is always know where your mates are, because
Okay.
they're the ones who are going to back you up when you go down.
That's a good one. I like that one. That one's
We
good.
never with all the things today. This evening, I've been quite deep in my in my analysis. I'm surprising myself.
Don't you love it when that's kind of the beauty of these live shows? Wow, I can't believe that just came out of my mouth. That was great.
Yeah,
Oh man.
Nick's
Funny we're recording it to go back and see what I said. Oh yes, we are. That's useful.
Yeah, sometimes I'll have those moments on the show, and I'm like, I don't listen to the show every week like I used to in the beginning to audit, kind of like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have said that. I go back and listen every once in a while. I'll just do like a little random check, probably like every 10 episodes or something, and I'm like, geez, okay, that was really good. No wonder, like, I kind of amazed myself, but humility over here.
Yeah, next time you're at Costco, give it a try.
Costco. I'll be sure to listen to the mental model one.
See, I don't listen back to mine at all. Really, I'll dip check into them when they've been recorded, just to make sure that they did record and all that sort of stuff. And I'll have a quick, I'll keep an eye on as I'm going through an episode or an interview. If there's something I think, oh, that was contentious, or I might need to, I'll make a note. So I'll go back. And if I make no notes, I don't need to go back and check it. So I'll, cut it, push it, and let it go live. But then I had a weird thing where I was having a conversation. It was a panel discussion, and one of the other guys, well, actually, the other girl on the panel, she quoted something off her thing as part of her presentation piece, and I was like, oh, that was a nice quote. That I like that. And so I said to her afterwards, "Oh, do you mind? Where did you get that quote from? Because it was really good." She goes, "That was you off your own podcast." Like,
wow.
Oh. Okay, I should have really known my own what I've said, but I inspired myself. I like that.
I haven't had that moment yet. I only get those like little moments of like, and this is kind of tangentially related. It's like, oh, people actually listen to the show.
Well, actually, it's been quite.
Yeah. Oh God,
it's been quite good. I've had a friend of mine messaging me as we go through the show, said basically he's been listening, and but unfortunately he's been listening to us drunk, which is why he's not actually quite. He's been quite restrained. He didn't put any public comments up, and so I was like, but yeah, he's just said, "Oh, I'm listening to you drunk," and then he started talking about paradigms and stuff, and I couldn't keep track. I was like, okay, fair enough.
Frank, have you ever had that experience where like you gone to a conference or something and someone didn't realize that they were talking to you, or you didn't realize you were talking to somebody, or somebody recognized you and you're like, oh, you ever had one of those experiences?
I've had experiences where, where especially for like a lot of these like coffee break kinds of things. And then later there'd be more of a kind of a, say, social happy hour kind of situation where you get to talk a little bit longer. And said, hi, I'm Frank. And then the other person says, yeah, I know. We talked at coffee yesterday. So for me, faces I don't recognize as much, but names, which is kind of strange. So it's like if I see a name, I kind of encode it in my mind and never forget the name, or rarely forget it, or don't know I don't forget it. I guess, but faces is really interesting where I don't get to pick up as much.
See, I'm completely the other way around. That I recognize faces majority of the time, so I'll do the whole "oh, I know you from somewhere." Rubbish at remembering names. So if you go around the room and you do the round the table, who are we all? I'm like, this is completely pointless because about 2 seconds after you say your name, I'm gonna forget it, or I'm there scribbling, writing them down to try and do it.
It'd be an interesting social experiment is if you had one of those ice breaking things, but like I don't know, it would have to be an event where there's like little to no social cost for not remembering somebody's name. But if you kind of just went around the horn telling interesting things about you or your research or something, and then nobody said their names until like, if you wanted to go network with somebody after the event, it'd be like one of those things that's like, that was really interesting. I'm really curious about what that person said. I'm going to go up to them and ask their name. It's like, that puts the pressure off to really like, you wouldn't introduce yourself. Be like just jumping into stuff you've done, and kind of interesting, right? Because then it really, I don't know. There's also some of this like social pressure attached to names. When, like let's say they've put out a piece of seminal work, or they're really important in a certain organization or something, but if you're just talking to them as a person and don't put a name to it, then like, I don't know, you feel like those connections might be stronger. I don't know. It's an interesting social experiment.
Well, there's also something like that with things like your post-nominals and things like that as well. That if you just put up your name just on its own, I tend to think that people will interact with you better, or more normally, shall we say. But then as soon as you give them a business card, which maybe has got your post-nominals on, or an email or something like that, like, oh, what do all these letters mean? And they suddenly start getting all, or certainly treat you differently. Or maybe it's just my parents, I don't know. But no, I've certainly found that, because I also do, I get involved in politics in over here as well. And so when I'm trying to get, I'll send somebody an email from maybe my work address as opposed to just my personal address, and they see a very different side of me, I guess, and it does change the way that people interact with you.
Yeah, I had a colleague who was very adamant about leaving off PhD from their email signature because they didn't want to intimidate the people that they were talking to from the user perspective, right? They didn't want somebody to feel like, oh, they're talking to a doctor over here, but they just wanted them to think that they were some person. I don't know. Have you what about you, Frank? What do you think?
It tends to happen a lot in kind of conferences. You get your name tag, and you can go to the the place where you get the what do you call those little ribbons, right? Like session chair or something like that, first time member. And I was just going to see, you're talking about the Yerkes-Dodson curve, where there's the people that are new, that have that, and then you have the people that are maybe still trying to prove something, and they'll have a lot of things. And I was probably at that stage, and then you get to that point where, like, the more established the person has, they just don't put anything, and some people will just walk around even without a name tag, and so it causes people to go to introduce yourself and be more approachable versus someone you see, kind of like a general or something. Looks like that.
I always flip over my conference badge so that way people can't see my name. Is that something that you do? Like, I will do it if they request me flip it over or they ask me what my name is, but I usually flip it so that way no one can see.
So I've seen now In fact, the ergonomics conference, the Chat Institute's conference, the EHF, whatever year you're in, they've actually got a good trick now. They print your name on both sides of the tag, and I'm just like, you've done that, because there is not. I mean, I don't know what it is about the. There must be some really good statistical modeling or something behind it, but no matter when you're wearing the tag, if it's got a blank side, it will always go to the blank side whenever you don't want it to.
Right.
As soon as you don't want to be known, it'll flip. It's like somebody's there and it'll just flip it over just so it's present when you're trying to be maybe slightly more incognito.
Yeah, mine isn't really associated with like incognito or anything. It's just one of those things where it's like if you're going to talk to me, you either know who I am or we're talking because of the subject matter and not because of, I have a podcast or anything like that. It's I guess that is incognito in a way. So I don't know what I'm talking about here.
I mean, you don't have that moments where you're just like, do you not know who I am?
I host a podcast on human factors. Do you know who I am?
Oh. So I had a slightly embarrassing moment today. So I think I mentioned my wife started her human factors degree, which is very exciting. But she's also now signed up as a student member of the Chat Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors, and so she was doing her. They now do sessions. So if you're a new member, they'll get the new members in for a quick, Zoom call to make sure everybody's all right. You get the most out of the institute and things like that. And so she was in that session today. And apparently one of the other people in the room messaged her and said, do you know Barry Kirby? Like, yes, it's my husband. He hosts that podcast. I really like it. And I was like, what? So she's messaging me this and a few other bits that were going on. And I was like, check my ego out. It's like this big. But yes, that's my claim to fame for today. It's somebody else, at least one other person has listened to the podcast.
Those are fun times. What else is going on, guys?
It's a really weird week. Not a vast amount. I seem to be so flat out with work and all that sort of stuff that it's I've sort of had the past 2 days of doing, I know you shouldn't call it daddy daycare when you look after your own children, but I've been doing daddy daycare because my wife's been went off to a spa for 2 days.
You've been fathering.
Yeah, doing that whole parental responsibility thing.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's been bad for her to be able to go and have a bit of a break, and apparently she had massages and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, well, because I come back with the response of, well, I'd quite like to go for a couple of days break. And she's like, oh, do you want to go for a massage and stuff? I'm like, well, not really, no, but I don't know, some sort of gadget show type thing, or something like that.
There you go.
Apparently that doesn't fall under the same realms.
That's a bummer.
Oh.
Frank, what's going on with you?
Well, for me, I've been trying to reestablish my commute, and that's something I read about where it was kind of strange. Where I think it was like back in 2019 where I started doing a more telework job, but it was before the pandemic hit, and it was this on an airplane, and they said, oh, I think it was actually LinkedIn. It was through LinkedIn Learning or something. They had like a sponsored video on telecommute best practices. And I said, oh, nice, cute 5-minute video. I'll listen to it. And there, 2 weeks later, it's like, oh my gosh, that was an hour-long video on how to do telework. And then one thing I forgot about is establishing a commute, doing something to get you into the mode of working and something to get you in the mode out of working. So whether it's taking a walk, reading a book, and something that's more ritualistic and consistent to kind of get you into this. And then one of the things is like I like to do like things like here, like helping out with a podcast is a great way of kind of getting away from work and kind of getting back to regular non-work kinds of things. So that's one thing I've been trying to do, is making time for that. It's really interesting for that transition period always existed, especially when in the office. But then it's just something that we just take for granted. Like I said, you like with the education system, we had a certain ways of doing things, and then and now that we're outside of that, we forget how to act, as they say.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think people operate in different ways. Because I've since I've gone fully remote, also back in I guess this was 2020, right before the pandemic. You know, I've now it's a little different, but then it was, you know, I have workspace, but I didn't do the commute. I would kind of roll out of bed and be ready to go, and it really wasn't that difficult to switch modes. You know, I'm at the desk, I'm in work mode, and then I leave the desk and I'm not in work mode. And I think most of my success comes from being able to switch laptops. You know, you're on your work laptop and nothing else goes on that laptop except work. And if it's plugged in, you're focused on work. And here, since I've built this pod around me, you know, I leave the pod and it's not work. Unless I bring a laptop with me, which is rare, but leave the pod, no work, you know, and come into the pod. It's either work or podcast or some combination, you know. I don't. So it's interesting because, like, are you saying that you are kind of putting in a virtual commute? Or you're actually commuting, aren't you, Frank?
Oh no. So I'm trying to force a commute. Yeah.
So I mean, what do you do to like fill that time? Are you just like in the car driving yourself around to get in the headspace and then come back home and then work? Or because I've heard that's something that people do.
Oh, I never thought about that. About once a month I get to drop off the HOA check, so that the homeowners association check, so that helps. I call it take a walk around the block. There's actually a what do you call it? A Starbucks and some other things that it's about a 12-minute walk, but I don't have to cross any busy streets. I can kind of walk around my complex and then kind of sneak off the back and kind of do that. So I started doing some of that, especially at the end. I think there might be a bar there too, but it's a family-friendly show. And like a pizza place, a CVS, where you can get, you know, like medicine or whatever like that. So I kind of stick an errand at the end, right after work. That usually helps. But the morning commute, I'm still kind of, especially with the kind of early morning stand-ups, that needs a little bit of practice.
Yeah, Barry, I keep deflecting from you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just find out you just don't want to talk to me anymore, and yeah, I'm just taking it personally. No, that's one of the things I found. Certainly during the first parts of our lockdown was I'd set myself up in the living room in the house because we had nowhere else to go, and I'd always pretty much always commuted either a short or a long commute up to this point. So I did find it quite difficult. So right at the beginning, I was like, oh, I could just roll out of bed and straight into the living room and crack on with work. But then I found that I worked long hours anyway. But then I was constantly thinking, oh, well, actually, if I just nipped on for another 5 minutes, I can get this job cleared out and this job cleared out. I can knock this off the list. And I was like, oh, no, that's bad practice, because I was leading a team as well. So I was also having to go at my other team members to say, you shouldn't be doing this. Why are you online? Get offline, you know, because they're trying to do them sort of characteristics. I'm like, no, you're stuck at home. You've got nothing else to do. But also being really bad at that myself. So one of the big things I really liked was we put a sort of cabin in at the end of the garden. And even if I'm working from home now, so I have been working back in the office now for a while, which is about 15 minutes drive away, which is fab. And I'm going to do that, which is actually, going back to the early conversation, is in a rugby stadium, which is cool. But the office at the end of the garden, that still has, you know, it's a 20, 30 second walk to, or maybe a minute walk to the end of the garden. But I still feel like you're going to that transition of, you know, I'm coming into this space here, and I'm either podcasting, or even if I am just reading, or maybe even playing a bit of a game, then I'm still in a different space from the house. I try not to work in the house anymore. It's that's got to be home and family space, because I need that transition. Otherwise, yeah, I just find it hard to click out of workhead.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I don't know. I'm very much like strict with my hours. I'll do like a early morning thing to a certain time, and then once that's done, work laptop. And I think it's part of that segmentation, right? I think for some people that means going to a physical office. For me, that means taking out the plug from one of my fun computer to my work computer, and that's the mode that switches for me. So cool. As long as I can. Otherwise, the work laptop is closed, unless there's something I'm expecting outside normal working hours. But that's far and few between.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess, because I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day. I guess, because if you're running your own business as well, I guess that adds a different dimension, because you kind of feel like, because I have all the apps on my phone as well. So all the, Telegram and all that is always on my phone. So if anybody wants to I kind of feel like I need, if something happens in the business, maybe a member of staff needs help or something like that they always need to get a hold of me. Now, in reality, they don't, because they're all cool people and they know how to solve problems. But then I kind of feel, well, what happens if I'm letting them down? Something like that. So I end up doing myself more harm than good, to the point that my team are all telling me I need to go and take a holiday to stop being so stressed. So I might have to listen to them at some point. Maybe.
Yeah, the always on, like, that's so interesting, because I don't know, even segmentation is really important, I think, to me, because like even with the podcast, like when I first started this thing, had all the at least funds that, like I said, this thing's out of pocket, right? So it's like it's paying for all the stuff out of pocket, and we're finally at a point now where like I said, 2 patrons away. I guess if anyone's watching this is listening for patrons already, so we're 2 patrons away from being completely self-sustainable. I realized around episode 200 that I needed a bank for the podcast, and so I started doing that, so that way the money isn't all out of pocket, it's just the difference, right? And
my wife doesn't want to be listening to this then, because my podcast is we've just gone through a little blip where I've just gone, oh, we can do all of the things, and it's complete. Its revamp is pretty much there now, but it's cost me a fair bit of money.
Yeah.
But then you see, like, found nice bits of kit. Like I mentioned the other week, I've got the my new mixing desk, and of course the new mixing desk means I had to get a new microphone because the quality wasn't good enough. And I'm now looking at maybe a new set of headphones and gadgets, the gadgets you can get, and it just never ends.
No,
but it's fun though.
It's a hobby, right? It's a hobby.
Yeah.
And I've always viewed it as like a way for professional development, right? It's like, from your perspective, you're talking to great people every week or so, and we get that at conferences. That's kind of our interview style, is we do interviews at conferences, we do conference coverage, but then we get to talk about just random stuff every week, and that's kind of just been a way to flex our human factors muscles.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of did mine as firstly, I did it. The professional development thing is absolutely spot on, because I wanted to improve my my public speaking as a way, and I was just like, well, I do public speaking already, like say with the politics side of things, and I'm happy giving presentations and things like that, but I just wanted a different way of trying to work with my voice and how I talk. But then also it was just such a cool, I was like, I could just ring people up and ask them for interviews, rather than sort of like trying to be necky for either a job or like make people think I'm trying to go for a contract or something like that. But I wanted to be able to introduce myself to people and have conversations with them, and this has just been an ideal way. Sort of saying, dropping them a random message and saying, oh, do you fancy being a guest on my podcast? And yeah, I've just been really lucky, which is quite cool. So it's all very selfish, really.
Yeah,
but it works for me. Because
I feel that.
So gadgets and ego. I mean, what more could you possibly want?
Frank, when are you starting your podcast?
Oh, as soon as the meat prices start going down. That was another hobby I do, is barbecuing. And with this during the pandemic, that's what I do a lot, is especially on demonstration day. where all the hard work has been put in, and it's just kind of letting the demonstration happen. And so that was a ritual I would do, is I'd smoke a piece of meat at the demonstration. But now I think it's just with inflation and things are just kind of letting that lapse a little bit. So maybe that's something I got to bring back. Like bringing back our hobbies, being mindful of that. It's part of that commute process of transitioning away from work things to. I would do a barbecue podcast, and maybe something like I used to do a lot more travel. I used to have a travel blog, things like that, like a travel and food blog. So, but I guess podcasts are the thing. Podcasts and what's it called? Those video, like those YouTube things, video vlogs. Is that what they call them? Yeah.
Lifestyle vlogs.
But
I don't know how many people would like watch a Human Factors lifestyle blog, but definitely travel and food. That's something that everyone loves.
That's because you guys do barbecue on completely the next level. It's I've been watching some like it was like barbecuing competitions and things that you have, and I was like, oh, I need some of that. That's just genius. Yes, I'm very inspired. It's very different from the way that we do barbecue.
Yeah, Frank and I used to live, or I used to live about 10 minutes, if that, from Frank, and whenever he would do a barbecue, he'd always invite me to come over and take some home, and I do miss that. I miss that dearly. It was good stuff.
We all need to bow around to Frank's.
Yes. All right, guys. Well, I think we're just about at the hour. So if you have been joining us, thank you for joining us. If you stuck around through the show, really appreciate it. For all our patrons listening, thank you again for your patronage, and we'd love to have you. Welcome to our 2 new patrons. And like I said, we will not be back next week. Maybe. I don't know. I won't be here. That's for sure. Yeah, I think that's really it. We have no sign off. Frank, thank you for showing up and hanging out with us. I've been wanting to move to a multi-person panel for a while, so this is kind of a good exercise in that. Barry, thank you for hanging out with us too.
No worries.
Filling in for the last X amount of weeks. Any closing words, guys?
Not for me. I'm going to go to bed because I'm tired.
You go to bed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great being back on for this, and very great to meet you virtually. Yes. Yeah. So, I forgot to send the chat all of the ones I hate this guy. I got to send those.
Oh, right.
I sent it to the wrong thing.
Shoot, I posted it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it was LinkedIn. Oh, it's a pleasure, and I do like this as a kind of a guest panelist. It's a lot of, it makes a lot less pressure because it's especially coming in from the not having practiced this that much, done it this many times. This was a lot really smooth and kind of be able to kind of play off of each other. So yeah, so something I hope that you keep doing, and I look forward to being able to see you again on this.
Cool,
excellent. All right, thank you for watching, everyone. We'll see you on the 4th at the latest. Bye.